Guests can find you.
Yes. Okay. So, hello, everyone. I know that I'm sure probably a diverse group of people are listening right now. Not sure where you are. I'm in California. So, I know that maybe you're in a different country, different time zone, but I just thank you for having me here and for being here and for listening. For me, just I always have lots of random stories to share, but I will try and stay on topic today. I am Danielle. As I mentioned, I'm in California. I am a single mom. So my daughter is 5.5, will be turning 6 next month, which we're excited about. She just graduated from kindergarten, going into first grade. And so my parenting journey has been interesting. Um, from just the beginning of struggling with infertility, having a loss before I had my daughter, having her. And, there's so many things that they don't tell you in the parenting books. And so I'm just like, okay, parenting books are great, but there's just so many things that they might not always prepare you for. So, whether it's a recent loss of my daughter's, her beta fish, Chloe, and trying to figure out how to navigate that conversation. Just had some not so good health related news for my daughter. So, in the last month, finding out that she was recently diagnosed with epilepsy and trying to figure out how to navigate that. How do I wrap my head around it? And since she's only 5, what do I tell her? And so, just different things like that. And then also, we just finished our first year of homeschooling. And I'm like, I don't know a lot of people that kind of look like me. For those that don't know or can't see me, I'm African American. And so, my daughter's actually biracial. So, she's half Sri Lankan and half African American. So, there are no Barbie dolls that look like her. It's very kind of an interesting combination. And so, there's really no one to reference or refer to. And so they try and instill just like her self-esteem and happy things and help her to be kind and navigate the world and teach her things. It's just a daily journey, but it's exciting journey overall. So that's just a little bit about me, a little bit about my background.
Perfect. So what we'll do is we'll start from the very beginning of your parenting journey because you mentioned some key topics where I don't think a lot of people speak about. And one of those was infertility. And you mentioned that you were going through that. So when you're going through the infertility issues and you're trying to have a child and you're working, you're probably talking to your doctor, you're probably pulling up books, you're probably searching online, you're just trying to figure this thing out, right? What
Yes.
was your state of mind as you were going through that journey where you're trying to have a kid, but it's a little bit more difficult than the average person?
Very good question. So with infertility, I actually just spoke to that recently. So a little bit more about my background. I am a certified life coach also. And so I love to work with women that are struggling with infertility, miscarriage, and that are also single mothers by choice, which no one really talks about. So very kind of taboo topics. And I know a lot of times very personal topics. So as I've kind of reflected on my journey, that really helped me come to terms with it. So my first kind of loss was about 6 years ago, very traumatic, and then ended up having my daughter. And for me, it was very isolating. There was no one really to talk to. I just got married. I got married when I was 26, about around that age. And so it was just assumed that, you just get married. I waited and we'll just be able to have kids and end up seeing a infertility specialist in this case, fertility specialist. But either way, and he's like, you have a 1% chance of having a child on your own. And it's just like, you do with that? Like there's, like, okay, then what do you do next? And so it was very isolating, very lonely. Then end up having, getting pregnant, which was exciting, but then that ended in a loss at almost about 5 months. And so it's just like, how do you wrap your mind around it? And for me, I didn't have a time to process the loss. I had the loss and had to go back to work 2 to 3 days later. And so, it's just the midst of the pain and the physical, mental, spiritual pain of it, and trying to process it. Thankfully got pregnant with my daughter right after that, but it was very difficult. So in that, things were kind of going well, then had trouble again at 5 months and was on hospital bed rest for 6 weeks. So I was just in the hospital, just staring at the ceiling for 6 weeks, pretty much almost by myself. With my husband at the time had to work. And so it's just me watching Harry Potter over and over again. So I've finished the series a couple times over. And then having her and, her being in the NICU. And then I'm like, okay, and I'm like, okay, well, I've overcome infertility, thinking, okay, I had my daughter, and then trying again and struggling with it. And I actually had a recent loss. It was 1 year ago, about so as of like June the 8th, it was about 1 year anniversary of that second loss and dealing with that. And so just at this time, it's like, okay, what kind of what do you do? So kind of going back to your question, is something that's very isolating. It's something that just you feel kind of guilt, you feel kind of shame, you feel broken, you feel inadequate. There's just a mix of emotions that someone might feel. And it's not just the woman, it's the man that can feel the same way too. But a lot of times men and women will feel differently about infertility. So it's important to kind of talk about it, even the difficult conversations, even when it hurts, to just feel less isolated, feel less alone.
Did you feel that you went back to work and you started that part of your life too soon after the first loss?
Yes, for me, I didn't have any PTO, so in that it was a new job that I just started. So I had only been on that job less than a year. And so for me, I worked in a call center environment. I literally had to go in. So it was before I was doing remote work. And one of my first calls that I took, it was a woman that had a baby and her baby was crying. And so I just broke down crying on the phone. And thankfully, my supervisor was understanding, but I didn't have any leave. I couldn't take time off because I had already missed time off for the first miscarriage. And so, in the midst of everything, no one told me all that comes into play after you have the miscarriage. And so I just had to go back to work. And, thankfully, my coworkers, they gave me a card, which just meant so much because everyone knew. And they didn't like coddle me and they didn't pity me, but it was just nice to know, that someone cared. And then I had people from church that surrounded me, a little bit of family support, but it still felt like no one understood. So for me, I didn't really have a choice but to go back to work. And then also the same thing for the second loss. I was in the hospital saying, hey, I just lost my baby. I'm sorry that I'm missing work. And then I'm like, well, this isn't my fault. And I really had to reevaluate my thinking around it. And once again, had to go back to work right away in the midst of pain. And for the second loss, I actually had surgeries. I had 15 staples, in that, and didn't get a chance to rest. I got maybe a few days off, not even a week, and just kind of had to go back to business as usual in the midst of pain and everything else. So, yeah.
I know for many parents and maybe people in general, they always feel, well, I shouldn't say always, they feel many times that no matter what's going on in their life, they're somewhat apologetic for missing time. So, for example, you went through the miscarriage and the loss of a child, and here you are feeling somewhat guilty because you're missing time from work. Or if someone were to get sick themselves and they've missed a few days, they may say, oh, I got to get better. I can't miss any more work. They feel guilty again. Or another example would be if they have to take a day off or a couple of days off because they have to bring a family member that is not feeling well or family member is having surgery. In the back of their mind, they're thinking, hey, I only can make a day or two because I don't want to miss 3 days. I don't want to miss 4 days. It's like we know in our minds that after a few days, like day 3 or day 4, we're like, I don't know. Can I miss another day? For you, because I know what I would do in that situation. I would say, hey, job, this is the situation. I'm not physically well enough to continue, and I'm definitely not mentally well enough to be present at work. I'm going to need some time off. Was there ever a point during that time, Danielle, that you were thinking, I don't know if I can maintain everything because I'm starting to feel a little bit of imbalance in my life?
Very good question. So yes, that happened often, in the midst of there was nightmares and just the sleepless nights and the tearfulness and the moments where you break down emotionally. But here in the United States, it's unfortunate. I'm not going to get into the politics, but it is unfortunate because when it comes to leave, like I was just talking to someone recently about it, and it's like you get a reward for whoever works the hardest, who goes to work when they have COVID. Because I had to go to work when I had COVID and I couldn't walk and still had to go to work. And it was unfortunate because they didn't provide any leave or any kind of really assistance. And so, a lot of times it's like the person that pushes himself the most and that goes to work when they're kind of half alive and half not alive gets the reward. And it doesn't matter if their leg's broken, if they're bleeding out on the floor, as long as they made it to work, then they get that badge of honor. And it's unfortunate that that's kind of the environment or what's being praised or what's being kind of sought after, what we're supposed to aim for. And I wish that I had that opportunity, but with my job to not work, at either risk losing my job or, being off with no pay. And for me, I was kind of the primary breadwinner. I made the most at that time. The first time around, I made the most when I was married. And then the second time around, not being married, and it was just me and my daughter and me and my daughter. But in this case, I couldn't afford to take time off. Like it just was like, you kind of have to grin and bear it, even though, like, okay, got counseling, which is great, but still had to like do counseling quickly on my lunch break, and it was just kind of rushed and didn't have time to process it because it's like I risked losing my job or not being able to make rent to take care of my mental health and physical health. And it's just sad that you have to kind of barter or kind of have that trade-off, one or the other versus having both.
I worked at a law firm, and that when what you said about how you have to like kind of determine which one you're gonna pour yourself into, either the job or your health or things like that. There's a lawyer I used to work for way back in the day when I was in immigration law, and he's married with two kids. Maybe he still is, but at the time he missed every birthday,
Mm,
every vacation, every special event. And when I started there, I was young. I was like 18, 19 years old. And I was just like an intern at that point. Um, and he told me, he said, if he can do it all over again, he wouldn't miss any of that because the money will always be there. It will always come and go. But the time you can't ever get back. And one of the things that he did just to see his wife consistently was he employed her there part time.
mm,
And he told me a very painful story. And he shared that his children are probably going to grow up. And when he's much older in life and he's going to need that type of assistance from his children, they may not give it to him because he wasn't there when they needed him. Right. And I think that's a price that many parents pay because, as you mentioned, they try to walk this fine line, this tightrope, if you will be, trying to make sure that I don't fall over to the left because I can't lean too much there, and I don't fall over to the right because I can't lean too much that way. And it's just difficult. And for you, Danielle, when you were able to finally have your daughter and she's growing up and you're making it work, as you mentioned, as a single parent, and understanding that life is a little bit more different for you now versus when you probably were married, do you have you seen any differences in how you approach things today versus how you approached it back then?
yes, very good question. So now I really am trying to be more intentional. So as you mentioned, like your coworker, it took a while, but I really had to weigh kind of the trade-offs and say, what's really worth it. So for me, I have more than one job. So I have at least like three different jobs, a side hustle, a little bit of everything. So there are times where I worked three different jobs in one day. And it was like this guilt of not spending time with my daughter and wanting to be there. And for her, she just wanted snuggle time and she still wants to just have cuddle parties. And I'm like, I can't because I have to on one laptop, close that laptop, have a little bit of a break, and then hop on the next laptop for the next job. And I said, this isn't life. So I'm in the process of getting rid of that other job and it's going to work out. I have faith that everything's going to work out. And I'm trying to, start my own business. So that's going to help too. But in it, just realizing more of just what are the priorities, what really matters in life. And especially since my daughter's having some more kind of complex and more life altering and long-term health challenges, it really has forced me to reevaluate things and saying, okay, what's really important? And, just in the midst of things happening in schools and just all the way around things happening in the world, just really saying, just living each moment like it's the last. And sometimes it's kind of sad and I don't want to seem depressing in that, but I'm really trying to be intentional. So I'm like, okay, I could pick up some overtime, like for example, working every holiday, Christmas, 4th of July, whatever it is, or I could take, say, what, I'm just going to take my daughter to an indoor playground and we're just going to play for 2 hours, or we're just going to go to the park or just go to Target where she loves to go. And so I'm just trying to be more intentional now than I was before.
How much of a, if I can call it this, how much of like a wake up call was your daughter to you in regards to how you want to structure your life now?
Yes, yes, good question. So, kind of going back to what I was only child and kind of, I feel like in a lot of ways, kind of raised myself. And so having her really open my eyes to a lot of times what's important. Just like if it's chasing after a butterfly, then it's those little things, and it's like before I was just always used to just working even in high school. I'd go to school and after school catch the bus to work. And that was at 16. And that was just my life. Is what I was used to. And then having her in my life, I'm like, it's just been a huge blessing. It's been life changing, but it's really helped me rearrange my priorities. And like I said, what's important, what's maybe not as important, and what's something that's just doesn't matter really at all. And so it's really just helped me to reevaluate, sorry, my priorities, and really saying, okay, let's just kind of live in the moment. Like, if it's taking a vacation, or my daughter wants to stay in a hotel. And I'm like, well, we live right here. So I would need to stay in a hotel. But I'm like, okay, maybe we'll just get a hotel for one night, because she just loves that environment and it's nice to get away. So it's just like really saying, okay, what can I do to make her life better? And also, how can I make it better than my life? I remember kind of my upbringing when I was a kid and just not having a lot due to a variety of reasons. But now saying, okay, we're on a budget. Sometimes things are a struggle. Thankfully, things are getting better, but saying, but what can we do to just have a little bit more fun versus, okay, work, 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 budget, budget, budget. What can we do to just enjoy life versus just kind of going through life and surviving? How can we thrive and actually enjoy life a little bit more?
For those who are listening and watching on Facebook, YouTube, and my social media, please stay tuned and subscribe and follow for more incredible interviews like the one we have with Danielle today. And we will be back for more.